and welcome to your Hometown Solutions, where experts meet to discuss your home, family, finances, garden, and garage. We try to cover everything here at your Hometown Solutions. I'm your host, Jean Newell with Waterview Realty. And in the studio with me today, we have an attorney who's going to be talking about bankruptcy, criminal law, who might be responsible for things in your family if someone decides to break the law, all kinds of great information. So get a pencil, get a paper. We're going to learn a lot about the law and you. Before we go into our interview, I'd like to invite you all to go to our website at yourhometownsolutions.com. That's solutions with an S. And there you'll find all of our experts, their contact information. We also have a lot of learning tools. So if you've been watching HGTV and you're wanting to know how to redecorate, or you want to know about mortgages, or whatever you want to learn about, you'll find it there at yourhometownsolutions.com. Also, we have a free publication called Extra Equity, which is about a 45-page booklet that is free of charge. Just give us your address and we'll send it out to you. That covers everything that you need to know about purchasing real estate, about moving, how to arrange furniture. Just about everything that you want to know. So remember, yourhometownsolutions.com. If you would like to get in touch with me, my name is Jean Newell, and my number is 321-480-1574. We usually have Jonathan Lack with Lack & Lack Chartered on the show with me, that we talk a little bit about ways to save your home if you're unemployed and so forth. Unfortunately, Jonathan's out sick today, so I'm going to mention a little bit about how to save your home, because we like to talk about ways that we can save your home or your business, and then all the things that are available to you if you have to go to the extreme of bankruptcy or closing a business. So one of the things that Jonathan talks about is the Hardest Hit program, and that is a statewide funding, and I'm going to give out his number because I don't want to say the wrong things. His number is 321-953-5115. That's 953-5115. And again, you can find him on our website. But the Florida's Hardest Hit program was designed for people who are out of work or have been out of work but have even a job, but they're underemployed by 10%. And this funding will pay a good year in the rears if you are behind on your payment. And if you still haven't found a job and things are really looking bad at this point financially, it'll also help you make payments in the future up to about a year. So it's about $42,000 per person that you may or may be able to qualify for. And that's a wonderful program that most people don't know about. Now, one of the things that we do want to discuss, we like to give you information. This is all about experts meeting to discuss the things that you may or may not know. So I'd like to welcome right now Eric Morgan. And Eric, welcome to the studios, and let's talk about criminal law, bankruptcies, and all those negative things, but how we can put a spin on it and maybe help somebody get out of their financial mess. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you so much, Jean. Thanks for having me.
And you're with Morgan Law, PA. Is that, yes, Morgan Law, PA.
Yeah, Morgan Law, PA. Not related to
any of the other Morgans.
Any of the other Morgans that are all over the airwaves.
It must be a popular name to get to become an attorney. I don't know.
I know three other attorneys in this area with the same last name. One does divorce, one also does criminal, another I believe is in real estate. So
it's funny. That is funny. Your phone number is 321-253-6223. You're located on Aurora Road, just off of Wickham, and right here in the Melbourne area. But there's a lot of things that people don't realize, and we like to touch base on finances and family and your home. And tell us a little bit about, let's talk about criminal law first. What exactly is I don't want to say the ideal client, that doesn't sound right. Who are you helping? What kind of criminal law is coming into your office?
Sure. Criminal law is kind of interesting because it's, if you can imagine, the medical world, if if everything you ever heard about medicine or hospitals or doctors was related to just the most horrific disease, for example, Ebola, if anytime you ever were to hear about medical news in the media, it was only about Ebola or some horrendously infectious, terrible disease, you'd probably have a very negative view of anyone with a medical problem or people that treat people with a medical problem. But the reality is most criminals, people charged with a crime, are very young, and most of the charges typically are misdemeanor, or even if they're felony, they're oftentimes cases where the damages or injuries or financial problems that were created by the crime are actually very minor. I mean, a law was broken, but in many criminal cases that I've had, there really are no significant injuries, but a law was broken and people are charged. But what we do hear about, are the Casey Anthonys and the people that murder children and the most horrific criminals, and that's how we, perceive the whole system. But that's maybe 1%, to pull a number out of thin air. I mean, that's not your typical case.
So I'm always curious about that. You watch a lot of television shows and the L.A. law and all that. If somebody really has, let's say, a whole bunch of traffic tickets and they've stuffed them in their glove compartment, and all of a sudden they put a warrant out for their arrest.
Right.
Now, that's something that you would get involved with, right? If they actually come and arrest them, can they go to their front door and arrest them, or do they have to put out a summons, or how do they do that?
Well, what you're describing probably would end up being driving on a suspended. They didn't pay the tickets. They're out there driving. A cruiser pulls up behind them, runs a tag, sees that it's owned by somebody with a suspended license, and that then they're stopped, et cetera, and so forth. And yes, many people, especially young people with kids, maybe with underpaying, jobs, they're working for $10 an hour or whatever. They're struggling to pay their rent, pay their auto insurance, make their car payment, pay their kids' daycare, and things fall through the cracks. Mm-hmm. They get a ticket, they can't pay, the license gets suspended, then there's more fines and fees. It creates a snowball effect. So these are just people trying to get through life just like everybody else, but they just don't quite have enough money to just get to work and back in the car and get everything paid for properly. Mm-hmm.
The one things that we always want to keep people off the street are the DUIs. DUIs, right? I always get that confused. I have a little dyslexia. Yes, those people that are frequent and serial criminals, I guess you would call them, that are out there driving on a suspended license. They've already had a couple DUIs and so forth. And those are the kind of people that we want to, of course, keep off the road if we can. But I want to make sure that people understand that if you find yourself in some kind of a situation, you've been summoned, or the police have pulled you over, is that the kind of client that would be calling you, that if they got pulled over from running a red light or anything like that?
Right.
I
mean, yeah, I handled. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to handle traffic citations. That's civil. That's not criminal. Just mm-hmm. Running a red light or a speeding ticket, something like that. That's a occasion where the police have stopped you, but you're not charged with a crime. It's just a civil citation. But I also handle DUIs, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And people, they go out to the restaurants, the bars, they have a few too many, or, sometimes it's people who are taking prescription medication that they've been prescribed, but mm-hmm. it's caused them to be impaired.
That's right. And there's a lot of laws now. I know I worked for builders who used to put on little parties at night for the real estate agents. And they got to the point where they would not serve any liquor at all, whether it was wine or sangria, anything, because you can be held responsible if someone were to drink at your function and then go out and get in a car wreck or something like that. So
it's theoretically possible, mm-hmm. but you'd have to have quite a lot of evidence of mm-hmm. A specific person pushing another person way past the limit. Mm-hmm. I've never actually seen a case like that. It's that kind of 1 in a million case.
The one thing that I hear about all the time is the teenagers and the young adults that are still at home because they can't find a job. And we're now becoming kind of a third generation of people under the same roof. A lot of people have their grandkids, their kids, or their parents, and we've got a multi-generational under the same roof. And some of these kids, because they don't have work, they don't have anything to do, they're out roaming around at 3:00 in the morning. My mother always said nothing good happens after midnight. But they get themselves into trouble. And how can that affect the parents? And as an example, I have a friend who happened to have a young adult living. Well, he wasn't supposed to be living at her house, but he was dating her daughter. But when she would go to work, little did she know he was in her house selling drugs, and she did not know this. So had he gotten busted by the police, couldn't she actually be facing charges as actually having a drug house and being kind of an innocent bystander, but involved in that civil case?
I think the issue that you're talking about is one known as civil forfeiture, which has been increasingly used by law enforcement, both at state and federal levels. It's a way of, in a quick and dirty and not fair way, really, dealing with criminal areas or places, people, or entities that the police have identified as sort of a criminal area without having to charge people and prove a crime, mount a case. They're able to just sort of, in a sweeping way, say, oh, this is a drug home, and just seize it. And what's ended up happening is law enforcement agencies all over the country have found that they can actually turn a profit seizing things. They're not even proving crimes, but they're seizing things, and then they're being sold, in these sales, as it was a pot house or whatever,
right,
at fire sale prices. And, that's how some agencies, sadly enough, are funding their operations. And it's almost a criminal enterprise, in a sense, by government agencies where people, the owner is not being charged with an actual crime. It's just this sort of...
it's like an aid and assisting a criminal.
It's almost like eminent domain or something. It's just the building is condemned as a criminal establishment and it's taken away. But that doesn't necessarily mean the owner was charged with knowing or anything was proven.
So that's where you could step in and help that homeowner by proving that they didn't even know any of this was happening. This wasn't even somebody that was living at her place, but it was just, I told her, get him out of there as fast as you can because you sure don't want to be wrapped up in that mess. Well,
what would I've actually never taken on a case quite like that, but what would have to happen is you'd have to sue the agency that is seizing the asset, whatever it is, whether it's a house or a car or whatever it is. You'd have to sue them and try to get an injunction, probably from a federal judge, to stop them from doing what they're doing. And typically they're doing it to little people who may not even be able to afford an attorney. And because they're not being charged with a crime, they're not even given a public defender. So, if they don't have money to hire a hotshot federal attorney to seek an injunction against a whole police force, these people are very vulnerable. They're not going to, oftentimes they may not even have money to mount a case like that.
I'm wondering now, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head because we do handle a lot of real estate information here. What if I have a rental property and someone that's renting that property from me is committing some kind of a crime? How would that affect me as the homeowner? The same thing if I own the home that they're renting? I know everything's on a case-by-case situation. But
again, if it got to the point where it became the subject of a civil forfeiture, as being this sort of drug house, then that owner could have a problem. Ideally, what police should be doing is not going after locations.
Right.
Right. A geographical location is not committing a crime. They should be
right.
Investigating and then charging actual criminals with committing crimes and not just trying to take things away from people without going through a criminal investigation.
So the one thing that most parents don't ever want to hear is to find out their child's been arrested. Take us through what exactly happens if a child gets, or I guess over 18. Well, they're not that's still a minor, is it? 21 is now.
No. A minor is still young,
under
17 or younger.
Oh, it's 17. So let's even say they're 18, 17. Make it 18 because they're not a minor. They've gotten themselves arrested because they've done something, or they've hauled them off to jail. What is the next step? What are they allowed to? You see in the old movies, they give them the phone to call, but that doesn't happen anymore. You can't. They don't just call somebody. You get that recording. Walk us through what happens when somebody's in jail and how they get in touch with their parents or an attorney. How that system has worked out.
Sure. So people who are arrested here in Brevard County would be taken to the Brevard County Jail in Sharps, and they would be booked into basically a cell full of recent arrestees, and within 24 hours they're supposed to be given an arraignment. Now, some people are able to bond out before the arraignment. And, that's the big question is, do you have money to bond out with? If you don't, then you wait till the arraignment, and the judge may release you on your own recognizance if you're a first-time defendant and the charge isn't very serious. And the bond hearings are the legal standard in a bond hearing is, are you likely to come to court? Are you a danger to the community? So typically if people don't have a history of missing court and they don't seem like they're going to run away, typically they'll either be released on their own recognizance or given a low enough bond where they can pay it, or get a friend or family member to be able to pay it.
So on that bond, when they say your bond is set at $2,000, technically they only come up with, is it 10% of that?
Well, it depends on the type of bond, but most bonds will allow you to pay 10%, but you would owe the full thing, obviously. If
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and sometimes you're expected to sort of put a car or some property against that, and that's why you're allowed to pay the 10%.
Well, I know I had a neighbor, it was funny because I had just heard the scam that was on the website and on TV. This was a couple of years ago, where they said, be careful if you get a recording or someone calling you and saying, we've got, your grandson, your granddaughter is being held. You've got to give us money right now to get him out of jail. And people fall for that because they might just happen to hit it lucky that person does have a grandchild, and the scam artist, collects a credit card or has them pay in prepaid credit cards or whatever. And I had just told my neighbor that scam was out, and she came over and she said, I just got the phone call that somebody, she said this, but the weird thing was she said, I got this recording that said, this is the Brevard County Sheriff's Department, and we're holding one of your relatives, and I don't even know if they said Brevard County, but they made it sound like it was a jail, and they said, you have to go to the site and put money into the site so they could make the phone call back to you. So I said, oh, that's a scam. So she didn't do it. And come to find out, her grandson had been arrested, and that was the only way they can communicate. They call you and tell you to put money into a prepaid phone, or I guess they call it their allowance or something.
Right. People do have accounts, and it's a huge, huge business all across the United States of forcing people who are in jail, typically on very low-level crimes, but the phone service for them to communicate with anyone is insanely expensive, right. and these jail services companies are making a killing. And, of course, it's not even the defendants who end up paying this. It's all the friends and family trying to sort it out and see even if they're going to help, they might not even necessarily immediately know what the person's charged with.
Exactly.
I will say this, if you get a call and you're not sure, you can go to Sharps and, talk to the front desk and find out, if the person's held. There's also, through the Brevard County Sheriff's Office, there's a way to look up whether people are in jail. So you can verify it before making any payment, either online through the Brevard County Sheriff's site or by going in person to the Brevard County Jail Complex.
Yes. So it was very strange. Well, anyway, the end of that story was we decided it was a scam. And about 3 hours later, this mysterious woman calls her who says, your grandson is in jail with my son. And he wanted you to know that he was there. So I told him I would call you, So it was we went, oh, okay, I'm warning him about a scam. And it turned out to be that's the new procedure. So the old movies and the things that we see where it says you have the right to a free phone call and they push the phone to you, you're not going to get that phone call. You have to have a loved one put money in for them to communicate with you. And I think the minimum was something like $5 that you had to put into this account, which right off the bat sounds like a scam. So there's so many things out there anymore that we're afraid to do anything because we think in terms of all these people calling and they're and then they've got phone numbers that look like something that's local. So beware. That's what we're saying right now is just beware of what's going out there. We've got about 8 minutes left, and I do want to talk about bankruptcy. Unfortunately, that is going to be the way for some people right now. We've tried to figure out ways to keep them from bankruptcy. As I said, Jonathan Lack always speaks on the Hardest Hit program that you might want to check into at first to find out, can I keep making my payments while I'm looking for a job? But it gets to that point where you just are overwhelmed and there's no place to go but wiping the slate clean. Tell us a little bit about the different kinds of bankruptcies. And I know it's always on a case by case, but there are different kinds of bankruptcies available for our listeners.
Right. So there's for consumers, there's two main types of bankruptcy. The most common is the Chapter 7, and that's typically used by people who make less than the median income for their household size, their family size. And the other one is called the Chapter 13, which is sometimes used by people who are over median income. And in that type of case, they're expected to pay some or all of their debts back, typically across a 5-year plan. Now, every now and then you'll see a under median Chapter 13, which can last only 3 years. That's not, those.
Is that median income for the whole county, or is it for the state, or is it by municipality?
Well, it's determined. It's done by state, and then within the state, looking at the zip code.
So they look at how many people are living in the family as far as median income and so forth.
Right. So, for example, for a household of 4, it's approximately $65,000. For a household of 1, it's approximately $40,000.
Mm-hmm. So if you're a single person and you're making $40,000 or less, you would then qualify probably for the Chapter 7, which totally wipes out everything and you're starting fresh.
Right. A Chapter 7 would just completely, a successful Chapter 7 would just completely wipe away any credit card, any medical, random, bills, old, broken apartment lease, broken cell phone contract, auto lease, repossessed car. If a creditor has sued you and gotten a judgment, you can wipe that out. You couldn't wipe away a judgment for fraud, and you can't wipe away student loans, child support, back taxes, or criminal restitution. On back taxes, there is an asterisk there. There are circumstances where you can include tax debts, but on student loans, there's just nothing.
I know that student loans, I listen to Dave Ramsey a lot, and that's the big bugaboo right now, that people have thousands and thousands, up to the $100,000 in student loan debt. And here they've gotten some master's degree in psychology or whatever they've gotten, and they're working in at some place for minimum wage because they can't find something in their now expertise area of expertise. So those student loans are not used in the bankruptcies. Is there any? And what
many millennials, of course, who have the most student loan debt of anyone, what many millennials are not aware of is that student loans were dischargeable in bankruptcy.
Maybe when they got them originally.
Up through the 80s. So when people like Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump or most of the U.S. Senate were in college, If they'd had a recession hit right after they graduated or something like that, they could have filed a bankruptcy and wiped out any student loans. And of course, back in those days, colleges were cheap, and they were cheap precisely because people couldn't borrow a lot of money, and it had to be something a young person could actually pay, or it wouldn't work. Now with student loans, people have the access to the capital, so what happens? The prices have gone way up. It's a bubble.
It's crazy. I know there was a seminar I went to just recently about how to send your children to college without a student loan, and it all based on maybe getting a second mortgage or something where it's on your mortgage as opposed to getting these student loans, because they get to be a little expensive and they don't always negotiate with you and you can't buy them down and so forth. So one of the things that I think a lot of people aren't aware of, we're here in Florida, which is a homestead exemption, which applies to bankruptcy in some ways because you can separate your home from your bankruptcy. Let's talk a little bit about that, where if you need to go bankrupt because you have too much debt, but you want to save your home, how that affects the bankruptcy.
Right. So, classic situation is, let's say I have a family of 4 and they're both working and the kids are doing okay and they've got the house and they're paying on 2 cars, and then one of them maybe loses a job or maybe just has a decrease in hours or a cut in pay. They might still be working, they're just not making the money that they quite need to pay everything. So what happens is they're doing their best, but they start falling behind on the credit cards and this and that. But, if they're smart, hopefully, people make mistakes, and I'm not saying not smart, but if they know what they're doing, they're going to stay current on their house, they're going to stay current on their car, and they let the unsecured debt fall by the wayside, because that's what we can put into the bankruptcy, is the credit card debt, is the medical debt. The house, if you're behind, bankruptcy typically is not going to save it, unless you can get current on it again. And it's very hard to catch up on a home once you're behind.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you're current and just making payments and going along, then in the bankruptcy, you can re-promise to pay on that home and continue making the payments, and you'll come out of the bankruptcy not owing the credit cards, not owing the medical, but still owing on your house, current on your house, and with the ability to continue making the payments and eventually pay it off and own your own home.
Right. And there's so many different avenues. Some people decide, I know they call real estate agents and they'll say, I can't afford my home anymore because I'm out of work. And so we look at that situation first before we list their home, because there are ways to do that with the Florida's Hardest Hit program. There's also something that Jonathan Lack handles, which is called the Principal Reduction Program, where if you're $50,000 upside down on your house, they give you that money to get you down to where you're even with what your home is appraised at. So there's some situations there if people feel bad. Gosh, I'm throwing $1,500, $2,000 at my mortgage payment every month, and I'm still owe $50,000 more than my house is worth. So there's all kinds of things that, again, we always harp on this. We always want to stress this. So you want to talk to some professionals before you make any kind of rash decisions, because there might be a couple avenues that you might be able to do first or position yourself in the best situation. Again, on the house, you can separate that, but they do have some restrictions, and we only have about a minute to go. They do have some restrictions on how much your car is worth and things like that they have to take into consideration when you go bankrupt. Do you know approximately how long it would take to, as far as the creditors are concerned, to be able to buy another home or to build on your credit again after a bankruptcy?
It's a very common question. I mean, at the end of the day, there's so many pieces and parts, moving parts to buying a home. But, the short answer is I've met people who've bought within 3 years of having a bankruptcy. Now, that does depend on what's their down payment, what's their income, what's the value of the home they're trying to buy. So there's a lot of factors, but I've met several people, more than a handful, who've bought within 3 years.
Well, they need to call you, Eric Morgan, at 321-253-6223. I spoke with Carolyn Wolf about this, and she said, yes, you can still get a mortgage several years after bankruptcy. And again, it depends on what you said, down payment, and whether the home was included in the bankruptcy. We really appreciate. Give out your website one more time, Eric.
It's spacecoastbankruptcy.com. for bankruptcy filers, and spacecoastdefense.com for those charged with a crime.
Thank you for joining us today with your Hometown Solution Experts, where we cover everything from your home, family, finances, garden, garage, and we were very happy to have Eric Morgan in the studios today. Thank you, and join us next week with the Humane Society. Bye-bye.